Either way.
Having slept since then.
Tonight's shir is sponsored Nishmat Maizeda, Yaakov Ben Shmuel, and Shem Shtav and Aliyah. We thank the second sponsor here from this morning, also Ed Kaplan, sponsoring Ed and Lisa, sponsoring in memory of Yechiel Ben Yaakov Meir Cohen, Shem Shtav and Aliyah. We thank Chuck Cohen, who sponsors tonight, Nishmat, his mother, Peril Gittelbot, Usher, and Shem Shtav and Aliyah. Okay, so a lot of sponsorships tonight. And you're welcome to sponsor a shir anytime. It doesn't be this year. It could be any shir. You're investing in Nitzchiyut, like the rabbi said at the shir last week on Monday night with Rabbi Ari Leibowitz. We're on page Nunbet. For those who weren't with us, just to remind you, this is an essay by Rav Soloveitchik about the topic of Kiddush Hachodesh. We're really at the end of the sugyas of Kiddush Hachodesh. So tonight we're going to continue with this essay. At home, do you have it or should I put it on the screen? I don't know if you have it.
I have it. I took it with me. I brought it with me.
You took it with you. Okay.
I brought it with me. Yeah.
Fine. Okay. That'll be helpful because I actually am not sure where it is right now on my computer because I have too many windows open. So you'll listen in if you don't have it. And if you have it, great. I'm on page Nunbet. What we've been discussing so far and why this is such an important essay, I think, to sum up all of the workings that we had involving Kiddush HaChodesh is because it delves into the question of what exactly is going on when we say we're using the calendrical system Bisman Hazeh. The Rambam had a strange formulation. He claims that the calendrical system is a parallel system to the system of Kiddush al Pi Re'iyah, that the calendrical system is not in the absence of Kiddush al Pi Re'iyah, now we have to figure out the calendar, but rather that the two systems always existed. The system of Kiddush al Pi Re'iyah overshadowed the need for the calendrical system, which itself goes right back to the beginning. Pun intended. Yes, I didn't know. It wasn't really intended, but I guess you could say it really was on some deeper level I'm not even aware of. Next thing, the Kiddush al Pi Cheshbon that is taking place in Foshtat in Egypt for the Rambam and was taking place in Skokie, Illinois in 5786. There's no calculation being done. The only calculation is to reveal the calculation that is being done in Eretz Yisrael, and that is the calculation that matters, and we're just following the calculations happening in Eretz Yisrael, to which the Ramban and others asked, first of all, there is no calculation going on in Eretz Yisrael, so what are you referring to? And secondly, when you say that we're just revealing what's happening somewhere else, what does that mean? It looks like we're just making the calculation happen. So the Rambam is building this idea, and what he came up with so far is that when we refer to, based on Hilchot Trumot and other places in the Mishnah Torah, the Rav built the idea that basically for the Rambam, there is, you could say, a connection between the need for the Kiddush, whatever type of Kiddush it might be, to happen on the part of the Jewish people, but not every Jew is actually involved in it. There's a representation of the Jewish people called the Sanhedrin. We saw this in a few contexts. If the king wants to expand the territory of Eretz Yisrael, he needs the sanction of the Jewish people, but he doesn't make a plebiscite. Instead, he goes to the Beit Din HaGadol in Yerushalayim. And remember, I'm skipping the twists and turns over here, where the Ramban was saying to the Rambam, but they have to actually be in the Lishkat HaGazit in Yerushalayim, and they weren't there 40 years before the Churban. I'm just keeping us on the main road. There are a lot of nuances here, but this is just for summary because I really want to get to the next part and not get bogged down. What we had dealt with is the idea that somehow the Sanhedrin Hagadol was going to be a representative, had a representative function. And this function is separate from the function that the Beit Din HaGadol has as the legislators. Now, when I say legislators, obviously there's already a Torah, but there's also an authority, legislative authority, granted the Beit Din HaGadol for takanot and gzerot, for dealing with certain kinds of cases that are national type cases, but that's not this. This is another function of Beit Din HaGadol, says the Rav, based on the Rambam, which is a representative function when it comes to something like declaring the new month or being me'aber the shana to make it a leap year. It's a separate function. In our conversation, unsuspecting, or maybe more likely, he just read the entire essay and chopped the whole thing. Mark Pershan, who is with us virtually and in spirit, and tonight, said, "Well, I'm just rephrasing what you said. Does the bridge go two ways?" Could it be that the people represent the Beit Din HaGadol the same way the Beit Din HaGadol represents the people? And I said, that is the question. That's a $64,000 question. Let's see what the Rav does with this. But you understand conceptually why that might be true, right? Because maybe it's a bridge, right? Maybe it goes both ways. We're on page Nun Bet. And on page Nun Bet, we're now going to look at the new section, page Nun Bet at the bottom, Ot Hey. And we've dedicated our learning now to the Nishmat three individuals, special individuals, all. Let's learn Nishmatam and also to raise ourselves up. Valkain Yesh Lomar. Alkain, because we said there's two elements that are happening for the Beit Din HaGadol. Now that we've spoken about it, outlined it, bottom of page Nunbet. Valkain Yesh Lomar the halacha me'ein zu ne'amra gam b'kviyat mo'adim. Also, this halacha with regard to the Sanhedrin's multiple functions exists with regard to Kviyat Moadim. V'yesoda hu de Kiddush Hachodesh v'ibur hashana lo nimseru lechatchila Sanhedrin hagedola ki'im leknesset Yisrael kula. The truth is that the idea, but he said Al Kain, who's following up on the idea that there was a representative function that the Beit Din HaGadol had, not just a legislative function. A representative function when the king has to go to war, and also now he says that in Kviyat Moadim as well, in terms of Kiddush HaChodesh. So really, Knesset Israel, the whole Jewish nation, is in charge of making Kiddush HaChodesh happen. The whole Jewish nation is in charge of making a leap year. Dehihi kovad mo'adim ayde Kiddush Chodashim ve'ibur shanim uchelashon hasugi bebrachot mem tad amud aleph, page Nun Gimel at the top. Yisrael de kadshinu l'mo'adim. It's the Jewish people who sanctify the holidays. Umishum kach. On account of this, chotmim birkat kedushat hayom mekadesh Yisrael v'hazmanim, in that order. K'mevur sham. V'chol samchuto shel Beit Din HaGadol b'nidon didan mevuseset al halacha hashniya shne'amra bo. All of the authority of the Beit Din in this matter is based on this second halacha that has been spoken about them. Sheish bichlal ma'asav ma'aseh kol Yisrael. That the action of the Beit Din HaGadol is the action of the whole Jewish nation. L'fichach, and therefore, Kishe HaChodesh mitkadesh ayidei Sanhedrin shel ayin aleph or birshutam, when the new month is sanctified by the Sanhedrin HaGadol, meaning Sanhedrin of 71, the national Beit Din, the Supreme Court, or with their license given to some other group, Hare ikakan kviyut kol Yisrael. When the Beit Din acts, the whole nation is actually acting Bram. However, en kocho shel Beit Din HaGadol yafel l'kiddush hachodesh v'ibur hashana ela mishum shu kovea ba'ad kol Yisrael. However, it's not the Beit Din HaGadol has legislative authority, just like they can promulgate a takana, they can promulgate a gzera. They declare as a matter of law that there is now a new month or a leap year. No. The Rav says, based on the Rambam, no, that's not using that power. What power are they using? They also have a representative function. And who do they represent? The whole nation. Ukviyuto kolelet chalot shem kviyat Knesset Yisrael kula. Their establishment of the new month, of the leap year, it means they're representing the entire nation. Ulam, however, Beit Din HaGadol b'Torah atzmo v'dino ra'a u'maseh Sanhedrin gedola greda bleed staff from kviyat kol Yisrael enu yachol likboa. All right, or likba. However, the high court of the Jewish people, in their own right, in their own greatness, as those who teach, those who render judgments, as the Sanhedrin Gadol alone, without connecting it to the whole nation, they actually cannot establish a new month or a leap year. It's only the other function of the Beit Din HaGadol, which is the function of representation. Give me one more second. What we'll see next, after the questions, comments come up for air now, are going to be 5 different, call them proofs, that Rav Soloveitchik brings from different sugyas, where he says, I will show you, not just from the Rambam, but also from other parts where the Rambam got this idea. He didn't make it up out of whole cloth. The Rambam is a Rishon, but he's not inventing stuff. Where did he get it from? He says, I think he had 5 sources, and he quotes them from Agadic and halachic sources. Surprisingly, he would use an Agadic source, but it's also part of Torah. So he quotes that, and he quotes halachic sources as well. There'll be 5 such proofs. We'll go get into those tonight. We'll get into, 3 of them, because the first 2 we actually already saw, or the first 1 we already saw. No, we'll see 5. We'll see 5. We'll see 4 out of 5, because the first one we already saw. Okay, let me pause now. Questions. Larry, please.
Based on this, one could argue that but for the danger of lack of uniformity, you wouldn't need the Beit Din Hadad.
Correct. Based, if not for the concern for a lack of uniformity, Larry's pointed out, if not for that concern, you wouldn't really need the Beit Din Hagadol. Correct.
Wow.
Yeah, correct. Because the Rav is making the point that their function here is vital, but only in as much as they represent the nation, not by the power vested in them in Sefer Dvarim, Perek Yud Zayin, to be the people who instruct, teach, promulgate, legislate, adjudicate. That's not this function. This is a representative. He's going to prove. He's going to show you. Right. One of those is you see right there, the next line. It's its own paragraph. Is in one sentence. Smuchim lezeh, the Kiddush Beit Din Hagadol miyusad al kviat kol Yisrael yishlavi mimikorot acherim. I'll find it from the source Kemosh Nevar Lahalan. Aleph lashon asugit the brachot ubeitza shetaknu el. Where is that? Triangle already circled them for you in case you have trouble finding it. It's on page Nun. The brachot mem ten amid aleph and beitza yud zayin amid aleph. That the Yisrael the Kachinu Lizmanim, and he referenced it just at the top of this page as well, Brachot Memtet, but it's also Sugya and Beitza, right? That the Jewish people are the ones who sanctify the holidays, not Hashem and not the Beit Din Hagadol. It's not a Masa Beit Din in that sense of it. It's a Masa Beit Din as representatives, not a Masa Beit Din as judges. And remember, we talked about this last time. The Gemara describes when it's Shabbos and it's Yom Tov. When we want to recite the bracha, it's a strange bracha in the bracha of Kedushat Hayom. We say Mekadesh HaShabbat v'Yisrael v'Hazmanim. Why don't you just say Mekadesh HaShabbat v'Hazmanim v'Yisrael, or Mekadesh Yisrael v'Hashabbat v'Hazmanim? But why is it in this order? Because we are not really Mekadesh Shabbat. I know I referenced on Friday night that we recite Kiddush, where we Mosif Kedusha, you have the Ayin Sham, the Ramban, and others, about what Kiddush is doing. But we're reflecting the reality. Baruch Atah Hashem Mekadesh HaShabbat. When you say on a holiday, which is Shabbos, Mekadesh HaShabbat v'Yisrael v'Hazmanim, so Chazal say that is deliberate. Anshe Knesset Gadol wrote it that way. God sanctifies Shabbos, God sanctifies Jewish people, and it's the Jewish people who sanctify the holidays. So here the Rav says, okay, notice it said Yisrael, not debating. Yep.
Sachem. Someone had a long meal and it became Shabbat. They cover the food. They make Kiddush.
Horse Ma'apar Mekadesh, yep.
And it is Shabbat by virtue of it getting dark.
Right.
That makes it Shabbat.
Nachon.
Nothing does.
Shviya v'kayama. It's not based on my decision. I could be Makabel Shabbos early, but if it's too late and I messed up and it's Shabbos now, it's still Shabbos, right? Shabbos waits for no one. That's what it means. So the first proof, he says, I already told you, the fact that it used the word Yisrael each time is to tell you it's the Jews. It's the Jews wherever they are. The Jews. Yeah, that's the Aleph. Bet.
So, Rabbi, can I ask you a question?
Wait, George, question, please. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, but aren't we we are relying on a certain expertise that they have, that the common person in Israel, Bnei Israel, that doesn't have. So, for example, Ibor Hashanah. How would we, as Klal Yisrael, say, hey, we're relying on them to do that, right?
Good. Yes. However, their power stems from one thing. They represent the Jewish people. That's the force with which they make it. You're right. They have to bring their expertise to bear. And as Larry pointed out a few minutes ago, I mean, come on, what would the consistency be if we just said, everybody just declare a new month whenever you like? People will be observing Yom Tovim in Sipori different than in Beersheva. It would be chaos. So obviously, practically, we need some kind of organizing body and certain expertise, which not everyone has, for sure. The point here is, don't mistake that expertise for being the same kind of expertise that's at play when they're adjudicating a case or deciding to make a gzeira. That's not the representative function. That's the authority, juridical authority, vested in them by who? By the Torah. Perek Yud Zayin, there's an unbroken chain, it's an Sanhedrin Gadol, they can put more members in, they add people in, they demote people, whatever it's going to be. But that's not this. Here, They're like a representative. They have almost like a governmental executive function, I guess would be. Instead of legislative, it's executive, right? It's representative. They have that function now to represent the nation. Am I making sense, George? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so look, here's another proof. Medrash Rabbah, bet. I'm on page Yun Gimel. The paragraph starts with a bet. Medrash Rabbah, Shmot Rabbah, Parshat Bo, Parak Tedvav, Parshat Tedvav, Parak Gimel. Amru Malach Esher Lifnei Hachodesh Baruch Hu. Everybody knows this. Everybody knows this line. All right, you've heard it in Divrei Torah since you're a child, for sure. The Malach Esher say before the Holy and Blessed be Ribbon Olamim, Master of the worlds. Eimatayah to Osid Amodot. So when's Yantif? V'chulei. Amar lahem anivatem naskim almash yisha gomrim uma'abrim edashana. You and me, God says to the angels, we'll just be agreeing with whatever the Jewish people decide is going to be. Notice it didn't say the Beit Din, it said Yisrael. Amar lahem HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael. L'sha'avar haya biyadi v'chulei. Initially, time was in my hand. Mikan ve'elachem esur biyadchem birshutchem. Now it's in your hand, O Jewish people. Parachav Daled, same section of Parshat Bo, Davar Acher Hachodesh Hazeh v'chulei. Yesh mehen omrim mekadesh Yisrael. Shim ein Yisrael mekadshim oto, ein oto kiddush klum. Some say the words mekadesh Yisrael because without the Jewish people, there would not be any kiddush at all. Don't think this is weird on the fact that God sanctified the Jewish people because they're sanctified unto heaven. Therefore, whatever the Jewish people sanctify, that's what's sanctified. Again, it's all about Yisrael. So it's because it's a Jewish nation as a nation. Kamuvan, understandably admits the Rav. There are people who could disagree with what I'm saying in this proof and say this is nothing. The Yishlomer Dekai al Beit Din Agadol. Maybe when it says Yisrael, it just means the Beit Din Agadol. Bram, however, Pshuta Shadivra Medrash Me'id, but the pshat, the simple, direct understanding of this Medrash in its three different sections of this Medrash, all testify. Israel. The Rav wanted to read the word Israel as actually the Jewish people. Yes, it's true that in reality, for various reasons, whether because we want to keep uniformity or because we need expertise, someone's got to calculate it. So Mr. Beit Din Agadol is going to do it. But don't think it's not the whole Jewish people acting. It certainly is. Gimel. Tosefta Parak Bet Mishnah Vav the Sanhedrin. Rishim Gamliel Rabbi Lazar Bar Tzadik Omrim Ein Ma'avim Hashem Ben Osin Kol Tzorchei Tzibur Ela Al Tnai Kadesh Yikablu Ravat Tzibur Aleihem. So the Tosefta points out the name of several Tanaim that we require here to do Ibur Shana, and anything that's the needs of the community, we have a condition. Has to be something that the most of the tzibur will accept. This is very hard to understand. Okay, when you have to do things that are for the needs of the community, Chidush takanot, ugzeirot, zikuka lekabalat rov hatzibur mishum ha'halacha shel ein gozrim gzeira al hatzibur elim kim rov hatzibur yichol lamod ba. We have a principle in halacha. We don't promulgate decrees unless most of the congregation or community can withstand those decrees. So obviously, when it's tzorchei tzibur, if that's what tzorchei tzibur means, then clearly you need people to buy in. We understand that. Kimavur b'avodah zarah lamed vav amid aleph v'horiyot gimel amid bet v'samchu rabbeinu Rabbi Shimon Gamaliel Rabbi Lazar Bar Tzadok she'im omrim and gozing zera latzibur elin kain Rav Tzibur yicholim lamod ba. They're the people who wrote the same memra. That's another restatement in the Gemara in Horiot, and the Gemara in avodah zarah is the same line that's in the Tosefta. It's just a different formulation, but in the Tosefta edition, it added something else, and that was the issue about Ibur Shana. Ve'im otam ba'alei hashmua, but the Sefta kan. They're the same people who spoke with Sefta. Bram. Yet, however, Ibur Hashana shnispach al halacha zu and muvan. What is going on line end of line 1 of this paragraph, the last paragraph, Ot Gimel? In Ma'abim Hashana. Why is that in the mix as something that requires Kiddush Kabbalah Rov Tzibur Aleihem? Right? Mumayich patlan im Rov Tzibur einam mekablim et Ibur. Who cares if people don't accept it? If they're making a due decree, if they're promulgating an enactment of some kind, okay. Ein rovat tzibur, ein goes in zero tzibur, eli and kain rovat tzibur chol lamod ba. That's they say. But what's the gzeira on that tzibur when it's Ibur Shana? They just decide. They don't need their buy-in. It's like a judicate. They're just deciding, okay, we looked in the sky, we decide we have to do this. Instead, it must be that this is proving what we said before. The Ikar Akviyut, Nimsel Yisrael, the mainstay of the enactment, of the fixing, of the timing of things is given over to the Jewish people. Page Nundalit, Ba'ad Kol HaTzibur. They're functioning, representing the whole congregation, the whole people. If most of the tzibur has not accepted the act of the Beit Din Hagadol, the ibur would not work. Mishum dechol samchuta shel sanhedrin gedola novat mehalacha shekviuta hi kviat kol Yisrael. Now, Bram, however, b'medvar amurim kserov hatzibur mekalim ekviut. It's when most of the congregation accepts their establishment of when Rosh Hashanah, when the Ibur Shana is going to happen. They don't have the power to do that. We check initially before we get started. Can most people withstand or not? You don't need a tanai when it comes to general gezerot and takanot. Because it's known they can't. It's not a tanai. It's the reality that they won't be able to withstand it, so it doesn't take effect. When we call makom gam biachas lahem nishna b'tosefta din tanai. Right? Yet the word tanai appears in the Tosefta. What is that condition? Al korchein, against our will, so to speak. We have to say, you have to admit, the perusho shel tanai hu b'dika b'yicholet hatzibur la'amod b'takanat beitin. It means you have to check to make sure they can withstand the takana of the beitin itself. Advarim muchachim mitoch l'shono shel Rambam perak bet meilchot mamrim al chabei beitin shenir lehem v'chulei tzrichim lityashev b'davar v'leidat chilim rov hatzibur yicholim la'amod b'hem. They actually have to sit before they promulgate a new law. You have to see, is this something most people can withstand? Do a market research. Can most people withstand this?
There were some takanot that they tried to.
There were. That
they weren't accepted.
Right, it's true. It's true. Even if they did the market research, thought it would work, and they promulgated it, didn't work. It didn't work. Yeah, for sure. Shemen of Akum is an example. The other examples. Shemen Akum. One time doing, like pot Akum, Chalav Akum, said they wanted to outlaw also maybe the oil. Didn't work. V'dina tosefta it still has to be kosher, but v'dina tosefta mitachez gam l'kiddush hachodesh. The Rav thinks, even though it's at Ibur Shana, it also refers to kiddush hachodesh. Af de lo befeirush itmar, even though it's not said explicitly. V'alnid kalim v'famim b'dina mavur lefum ria tarak b'Ibur Shana. We find sometimes, where we get stopped up with the explicated one, and we're rushing along. It'll just mention Ibur Hashana, not kiddush hachodesh. V'chol zot shayach gam l'kiddush hachodesh. Why does he think this? Because I am Tosfot Sanhedrin Yudal from Midbet, where in Dibur Matche and Abrim, where it says the Mafarshe Din Yehuda Gamanagel Kiddush HaChodesh. After the Gemara in Avur Rak Benidon Ibur Hashana. What is this referring to? There's an idea that when you want to be Ma'aber the Shana, you Davka have to do it in Yehuda because the Shechina is shoreh more with Shevet Yehuda than other Shvatim. That's what the Gemara says. So the Bali Tosfot there say it also applies to Kiddush HaChodesh. But most of the Rishonim rejected that idea of the Bali Tosfot. The Rambam rejected it as well. Now Rambam Perakdad Halacha Yedbet Sover. The Rak Bibur Hashana Ishtana Halacha Shel Yehuda. Of Kiddush HaChodesh Yehuda Eina Ma'ala Ve'eina Marida. V'Rak Din Eretz Yisrael Hu Shenamar Bo. The din for Kiddush HaChodesh is not that it has to be in Yehuda for the Rambam, but that it has to be in Eretz Yisrael, meaning all the Jewish people of Eretz Yisrael. So there actually are Jews there, and if there aren't, well, we'll come back to that. Because that was obviously in the time of the Rambam. In terms of this little detail about Ibur Hashana, it's true. It's considered preferred over Kiddush HaChodesh in terms of requiring Yehuda. The Berishon Chutz Din Eretz Yisrael Gam Din Yehuda Nitchadesh. Okay, so in addition to the din of needing Eretz Yisrael, there's another din with regard to Ibur Hashana that has to be in Shevet Yehuda that they do it. But he says my point still stands. Even though it referred to Ibur Hashana in the Tosefta, and it says you need the T'nai, included in that really is Kiddush HaChodesh as well. In Kiddush HaChodesh, there's no such thing as the tzibur not being able to withstand that. The my nafkim nibis fil rovat tzibur. Matan nikba chodesh. What difference is going to make one way or another way? But bishlam beibur hashana, harbe kshiyim kruchim bekviyato kigon isser chodesh liyotze bo. But in a case where they're me'aber the shana, that is something where they have to check if most of the congregation, the community of the Jewish people can withstand it. Why? Because in Ibur Shana it means that there's a second Adar. It means that the Isser Chadash, remember Chadash? You can't eat something until it passed through the date of Tet Zayin Nisan. So it's a full month off. Now you have more new crops that grew since Tet Zayin Nisan, haven't passed through a year. We won't be able to eat an extra month. So that is a hardship. So then therefore they have to check every single time. But Kiddush HaChodesh, they don't have to check every time. But Kiddush HaChodesh is still part of the representative function of the Sanhedrin Agadol in Yerushalayim or in Eretz Yisrael, representing all of Eretz Yisrael. So, and that's where he mentioned Isser Chodesh Yotze Bo Ayin Sanhedrin Yud Alef Bet Hakol Smeichim and Ma'abrim Shana. We could look this up. We're not going to. Kiddush HaChodesh in Amal and Amolir Olam Ravat Tzibur Yachol Amod Bo. Most times, the Jewish people can withstand one way or the other, and therefore the representative function, not the legislative function, is at play, and it works. Is everyone with me? We're up to 1, 2, 3 different proofs. If you don't get all of them, it's fine. The point is you got something. That's the main. That's the main thing. Okay. Next, Hinei Dalad. Hinei Chazina. Diyeshna halacha beibur hashana the beinin reshut nasi. When it comes to the ibur shana, we require the permission of the nasi. Kimavur b'Sanhedrin Yud Alef Amibet and the Ram Perak Dal Yud of a Kiddush HaChodesh Paka halacha zu. We don't have such a halacha for Kiddush HaChodesh. Rak mishum takanta the Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai shafil rosh beitin b'chol makom shlo yihu ha'edim holchin el lamakom havad. Right? Well, the halacha is that if the rosh beitin is somewhere else, the witnesses should still go where? They should go to the place where the court meets. Well, we didn't see Akamar yet. That's in a few pages from now. In other words, they don't go to look for the rosh beitin. When it comes to Kiddush HaChodesh, they look for the beitin. If the rosh beitin is away on business or something, with family events, fine. So we'll do it without him. We'll have someone else be the stand-in. He's not required. But the beitin agadol is. Harei de b'halacha Sanhedrin ne'amra halacha shniya shel nasi. The chavrei beitin agadol is the kukim l'reshuto. Right? The halacha of Sanhedrin, it says that another halacha with regard to the nasi, that the chavrei beitin, they need his permission. Right? And Ayin Rashi, Rosh Hashanah Sham, Shari Ikra, Chodesh, Tluyabo, Kiditznan, Pirkin, Dila'el, Rosh Beitin, Omer, Mekudesh, V'alfinan Mikrai, and we learn it from a pasuk. He has to say it. Ushanamad al toch, tochash al halacha, zu nir'eh, ki mishura din Sanhedrin, gabi Kiddush HaChodesh, v'Ibur Hashana, v'kol din Sanhedrin, b'chol Torah kula. It's different when it comes to Kiddush HaChodesh and Ibur Hashana from all the other dinei Sanhedrin, the rest of the Torah. V'arei davar. We don't need to go too far into it in terms of its in-depth idea. Ki kol maaseh beitin agadol, next page, v'orotav, einam tluim b'nasiv rishuto. The functions of the beitin, their teaching, their legislation, they're not connected to the nasi and his permission. V'imach yashno leminyan ayin al b'lishkat hagazit. If there are 71 judges in the lishkat hagazit, v'mele iko orat beitin agadol, then the beitin agadol is spoken even if he's away on business. Reshut hanasi enem kevin, and having given permission is not required. Even though he's the president, he's the nasi, and he's out of town, he's the prince, they can still function without him. The Kiddush HaChodesh v'Roshana Tluim b'Sanhedrin, l'dad Rambam, einam nimdadim mebet ba'amad hamida shel rad beitim b'chol haTorah, v'makovim halacha b'fnei atzmo, shegam din nasi nichlal ba, v'shayni mikol horaot shebetorah shenimsu lebeitin agadol. It's a very long sentence. I read it all together to be able to explain it all together. When it comes to Kiddush HaChodesh Ibur Hashana, we require either the nasi to be there or to give permission. He doesn't have to be there physically, but he has to have given license. They could do it without him. In fact, with regard to Ibur Shana, there was a little dice here if they should decide this way or that because it was adding the month and all these considerations. It could be that the Rambam actually writes this, that the Rosh Beitin comes back and he says, I gave you permission to do it, but I changed my mind. I'm rescinding the Ibur Hashana. Now it's only Chodesh Tishrei when they announce it, so he has a few months to get the word out that it weren't Ma'aber the Shana in the end because it's still Adar. But the point is, there's something here that's different about the role of the Rosh Beitin, the Nasi, than anywhere else in the functions of the Sanhedrin. And he explains with Tamal Shel Davar Hu. I'm 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines down on page Nun Hey. Yeah, third word in. V'tama shel davar hu. The din beit din hagadol biyachas lekviat moadim mevusas lo rak al halacha rishona hakovad chalota v'shma shel horat beit din hagadol. It's not that it was established by the beit din hagadol as a teaching, as something they're conveying, communicating. Kim gam halacha shniya. The secondary function is what's here. The Maase Beit Din Hagadol Kolel Chaloche Maase Kol Uma. It's the action of the nation. Davar Zeh Talui Bein Bechalot Shmo Shel Beit Din Hagadol Do a Machriya B'Dinei Torah. It's true they decide in matters of Torah. That's true. Ubein Be'uvda, and the fact Shedayani Sanhedrin Gedola Heim Gedolei Hador. That reality is Sanhedrin Hagadol is going to be the biggest Talmidei Chachamim. Obviously, the All Stars. It's the All Stars team, right? That's who's going to be in it. Shekol Beit Yisrael Nishan Alim. Everyone relies on them. Lufial Kol Mashem Osim. Whatever they do. Asuya Adei Knesset Yisrael Kula, it's as if the whole Jewish nation is doing it in that assembly, working together. Al Kain, Reshut Hanasim Akavid, and therefore the permission or the license of the prince, the president, is the Nasi, actually is essential. Shaharehu Agolosh Bekulam. He's the greatest of them all. That's why they made him the Nasi. The Nasi is Holazakin. It's Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. So from Gamliel, someone who's on such a high standing. They have to at least give license. Kimavu Ram Perak Al Milchot Sanhedrin Loch Gimel Uvahem Gufa Nemra Halacha Shagol Mechaver Ma'akev Al Kulam Mila'aber Al Hashana Bibli Rishuto. All right, he's greater than all of them, and he can prevent them from being Ma'aber Hashana. He can turn around and say, "I changed my mind." He can do that when he comes back to town. Okay, I'll pause here before we get to Pukhazi and take some questions. Go.
It's interesting that he does not mention that the Sanhedrin has to be in Shahagazi.
True.
He doesn't say that
True.
anywhere.
True. The Ramban took him to task for this. The Ramban said to the Rambam, but when they're not in Lishkat HaGazit, maybe they don't have a stature of being a Sanhedrin Gadol anymore. The Rambam did not say that. The Rambam seems to say Sanhedrin Gadol wherever they may be. In Eretz Yisrael, good enough. The Ramban said, I still have a question on you. What if they're not in Eretz Yisrael either? Because there isn't one. So what happens there? Okay, wait. We're going to see what the Rav is going to say. Try to reconcile this, but at least a good question. Yeah. Questions online? Are we good? Everybody lined up? Okay. A1.
I just want to make one
George,
comment.
please.
I think it's fascinating that we look at our religion as it is a democracy and it's not democracy in many ways.
Yeah,
but this
is
democracy. There's elements and this is a real clear case of that, which shows that there is a democracy, even though when the Sanhedrin says something, we're basically probably going to go along with it.
Yeah, but there are elements. You're absolutely right. There are elements of democracy in Judaism. We're up to the Parsha. Parsha Mishpatim has that. It's in right. It's in Hatot.
So what about when there's a Melech versus a Nasi?
So this is not related to the Melech. In a previous installment, we talked about the Melech. If he wants to go out to war, sometimes he needs the permission of the Beit Din Hagadol, but certainly in order to be able to expand the territory of Eretz Yisrael, he needs their license, and we saw why, because they represent the Jewish people, and then he can go out and do it. But the Melech is not involved in this function. He stands aside. He's not in charge of the calendar.
Right.
Yeah. But your point is very well taken. Yeah, there are democratic elements. Is it a pure democracy? It's not a pure democracy. America is not a pure democracy either, It's not. It's representative democracy. You elect someone, and they don't have to ask you every single time they want to do something. It's not. I mean, it's not pure. It's not direct democracy, right? They don't call you every time they want to sign a letter, do something. They think that most of the people will be with them. They do a poll, but they still don't know. And then you go to the polls and you figure out if you're going to keep them, you're going to throw them out of office based on the job they did.
You elect people who you hope will
represent you in the government. Yeah, no. Okay, so I mean, they say they will. Doesn't mean they will, but they say they will. But let's not get political. I have 9 minutes, 8 minutes. I got to finish at least this section. Upuk chazi asugi bebrachot samach gimel amid aleph uberamam perek al mechol kiddush hachodesh halacha chet. Di'im lo yiniach k'moto be'eretz Yisrael mekadesh chodashim u'me'aber shanim b'chutz la'aretz. Shocking, based on the sugi and brachot and in the Rambam. If there is no one like him in Eretz Yisrael, far and away the greatest gadol is living in Chutz La'aretz, and there's no gadol left in Eretz Yisrael. This is lahalacha v'lo l'maaseh. I'm just letting you know. So you could be mekadesh Hachodesh and me'aber shan in Chutz La'aretz. In Chutz La'aretz, But if there's someone like him in Eretz Yisrael, then he can't do it. What is one thing connected to the other? The din gadol hador nishneh b'kiddush hachodesh v'ibur Hashana. We see from this halacha that the din of the gadol hador is learned here in Kiddush HaChodesh and Ibur Hashana. If the greatest Talmud Chacham of the now, how are you going to assess that? Okay, but at least in theory, if the greatest Talmud Chacham, bar none, lives in Chutz La'aretz, and there's no one like him in Eretz Yisrael, so from Chutz La'aretz he would be allowed to be Ma'abed Hashana and Mekadosh HaChodesh. So he says, you see, look how it must be connected to gadol hador. V'nir od yoter. The chol din Eretz Yisrael b'yachas l'Kiddush HaChodesh ne'emar b'yikaro b'cholot shem ma'aseh beit din hakoveya. The Beit Din Eretz Yisrael, underlined portion. Moreover, the whole din of Eretz Yisrael related to the Kiddush HaChodesh was said principally with regard to the onset of the act of the Beit Din that's establishing the new month. The Beit Din sheba Eretz Yisrael yachol likbo b'shem kol Yisrael u'masav mitkamim alidei Knesset Yisrael kula. Ma she'en kein masa Kiddush of Ibor b'chutz la'aretz mufkam echolot shem kriyat kol Yisrael. So in other words, the Masa will either be done in Eretz Yisrael by the Beit Din in the name of the whole Jewish nation, and it will be established and upheld and fulfilled by the fact that it's representing the whole Jewish nation. But the act of Kiddush HaChodesh and Ibur HaChodesh in Chutz La'aretz, if there ever is such a thing, is not related anymore to Kriyat Kol Yisrael. It's no longer Ki Mitzion Teitz Torah Dvar Hashem Yerushalayim, but rather that the Torah, in the persona of the Gadol Hador, has moved out of Tzion, and the Dvar Hashem has moved out of Yerushalayim in order to be Mekadosh HaChodesh Ma'abed Hashana. Lefichach, halacha zu nemer rak heicha sheyeshno gadol k'moto Eretz Yisrael. Therefore, this halacha was only spoken if there's a gadol like him in Eretz Yisrael. Da'az ma'asav mufkay mecholot shem kiddush v'ibor al yidei kol ha'uma. Aval im lo mehiniach k'moto Eretz Yisrael. So when was this halacha spoken? That the person, Chutz La'aretz has no standing, if there's still people in Eretz Yisrael, because there's no Chalot Shem Kiddush V'Ibur by the whole nation, if there's no one left in Eretz Yisrael, the Gadol Hador's moved on. Avim loynach kamot to Eretz Yisrael, az yachol likbo v'yeshna b'ma'asav chalot kriyat kol Yisrael. So then, in that emergency situation, maybe it moves to Chutz La'aretz in the persona of the Gadol Hador, representing the whole nation. Quite an idea. Ulashida Rambam Muchrachim an al-Farash. Based on the Rambam's approach, we have to explain Beit Din HaKoveya, the Beit Din that establishes Kibel Reshut Mi Beit Din HaGadol. They have to have received permission and license from the Beit Din HaGadol. I am Basagad Ramban, the Sefer HaMitzvot Shama, fine. Because without that, Yefshel Lekadosh Ola Aber, he wouldn't have any permission to do it. Kimavur B'dvarav Perek Hey Halacha Aleph. Brahma. However, Halacha She'eretz Yisrael B'Kiddush V'Ibor Hanovad Migzer Katuv Shel Mitzion Teitzei Torah. Mechadashat. What's that halacha? The pshat of this understanding is it brings us the novel idea. The Reshut Kazumo Ila Rak Kshabeitin Hachodesh, Kover Ma'adim Be'eretz Yisrael. If there's going to be a court, if they want to establish the holidays, they want to know when the Rosh Chodesh is, and whether it be Ma'abed Shama, it's only in Eretz Yisrael. Da'az Al Pi Shesh No L'Gala Kamoto. Even though it's someone that's as great who lives in Chutz La'aretz, Yacholu Likbo et Hachodesh V'Laber Hashana V'Chomash Yaseh who also Reshut Sanhedrin. And so if there's someone who's as great who is out there somewhere, right, they can be Mekadosh the Chodesh Ma'abed Hashana, and whatever they'll do, they're only doing it at the permission of the Sanhedrin. If there's a situation where it's individual, there could be such license given, but not necessarily. Bram, however, if the person left Eretz Yisrael and there's someone who is of the same stature in Eretz Yisrael, Paka Reshut Beit Din HaGadol. That person who left Eretz Yisrael no longer has the license of the Beit Din HaGadol. Umela ein Beit Din shebechutz la'aretz kovei muadim she'en bichlal kviyato kviyat Knesset Yisrael. They would no longer have license to do it because they no longer represent the whole Jewish nation. In other words, to say this whole mouthful very, very succinctly, and it's complicated, there could be a scenario where a Gadol Hador living in Chutz La'aretz would be with the license and permission of the Beit Din HaGadol Mekadosh the Chodesh and Ma'abed Hashana in Chutz La'aretz. But if there's someone of equal stature, to say nothing of someone of greater stature in Eretz Yisrael, and if there's a Beit Din in Eretz Yisrael, obviously, then Chutz La'aretz has absolutely no standing. Everything's connected to Eretz Yisrael. I think we ran out of time for Ot Hey. which yeah, at 7:57. Maybe I'll have 2.5 minutes. Let's see. Maybe I'll fall on my sword, but maybe I'll get through the fifth of the 5 proofs. I think I can do it. 2.5 minutes. I have 2.5 minutes. 7:57. Tell us what Rosh Hashanah Chaf Av. We learned Levi showed up in Bavel, right? Remember the story? He goes to Bavel and he says to them, Chevra, he gets there and he says, Good Yontif, it's about to be Yom Kippur. And they say, no, it's about to be Motzei Yom Kippur. They thought that in Yerushalayim, they were Hachodesh the Chodesh, as they normally are. 29 days has Elul. It's like a rule, like, 30 days has September, 29 days has Elul. And that's almost always the case. And that one year, they happened to have made a 30th Elul, and Rosh Hashanah was the next day. Levi shows up in Bavel when? On Erev Yom Kippur, for actual Erev Yom Kippur. And he says, I'm here for Yontif. He shows up in his kittel and his white yarmulke, and they tell him, it's Yom Kippur now. No. So now they have to fast 2 days in a row. But what ends up happening? They ask him, did you actually hear the Beit Din say Hachodesh? And he says, no. They say, fine. Then we just decided we just did Yom Kippur when we did it. That's it. We're done. Then we're done. We did it. We did it when we did it. I objectively were wrong. Doesn't matter. It's a strange story. Tosfot picked this up. The Gemara had said this. Quote, Acharasar hayal livnei Bavel, va'asiri libnei Eretz Yisrael. The Ibrua le'elu, v'chulei. V'im tomar ve'yachin ichem le'echol. How could he permit them to eat? V'yesh kan vadai iser karei deoraita, because it's 10 Tishrei in Yerushalayim, it's 10 Tishrei in the world. They made a mistake. V'yesh lomar, said the Bali Tosfot Hatnan, l'kan perak sheni asher tikru Talmud b'krai kodesh, ben bizmanan, ben shlo bizmanan. V'amrinim b'gemara atem, afilu shogim, atem, afilu mazidim, v'afilu mutain. Even if you make a mistake, even if you did it on purpose, even if you made a mistake, you did it, b'shogeg, b'mei, it doesn't matter. Yeah? You established, it's established. Aval hacha, lehem haya asiri. Here, for them, it was the 10th. They had just observed it, so it's done. Even though the words of Tosfot are very, very hard to understand. We see that their shita must be. We see, though, that if they made a mistake, they're the tzibur of Bavel. They made it's wrong, but they made this decision and they went ahead, not realizing that it was wrong, and they did a Yom Kippur. Their calculation was right. And they're after they did their action, you don't say that they all made a mistake. It's exactly Larry's problem, right? If not for the problem that it would just be utter chaos, just let everybody do it because you're part of the Jewish nation. Here's an example where it did happen that way. It doesn't happen like that anymore, but yeah. It's only going to be according to the acceptance of the Jewish people and its assent. Skip the brackets because it's another twist and turn. Second paragraph on page Nunvav. Kol eile hadvarim muchichim ba'alil ki svaratenu benogel kiddush chodashim v'yiburshanim nechonei. This tells me, based on all this, what I say in the Rambam here is correct, and these must have been his sources. Ulamito shel davar ein samchuto shel beit din hagadol yafeh b'fnei atzma el mevusaset hi al halacha sheyesh b'kviyato kviyat kol Yisrael. Must be that the authority of the Beit Din HaGadol is not enough on its own. It's based on the halacha that they are representing the entire nation through their action. You note with all the pages that remain in this essay, we're only still setting things up for the actual Kiddush part. So where he's just lining things up. We're on the runway, but we're revving up. Stay tuned. Fasten your seatbelts because we're about to take off. Okay. If that doesn't bring you back next week, I don't know what will. Laila Tov, everybody. We'll see you next week. Monday, same time, 7:15 p.m.